We said no. No means no. No contract, no consent. We've never consented to the occupation of this country. And what you're doing, you're going against the capitalism in this country, the capitalism in the world, the 1%. It's the 1% that's taking our land. It's the 1% that gives nothing back to the First Nations people.
Stay with me for a while. Stay with me for a while.
We're here because we're in a climate crisis, and we're sick of the greedy corporates, politicians running this world into the ground. This is not their world, this is our world. We need to reclaim our future. We want compassion over greed, planet before profit. No one's coming to save us, this is up to us. Stand up, people, rise up.
I just think about my daughter and think about her future, and the life that I wanted to have in Toowoomba is falling apart because our town is being destroyed by drought and fire. And it's not fair. If you want to march with me, you can, but I'm going to take a stand right now.
Remember why we're here. We're here out of respect for our mother. We've got people living on this country who are that blinded by greed. We need to start doing things differently.
Leave this poor girl alone. You are no longer my own.
We are losing species at a rate that no one in the world is. I can't understand why people cannot see this world is dying in front of us. You are part of a machine. We are taking on that machine. That machine cannot keep going. This is the machine. Aren't we just do a funeral?
In a way, today is the death of empathy, the death of care and compassion for other living things on this planet. We, Extinction Rebellion, are determined to not let this become a reality. Will you stand with us?
Stay with me for a while.
We want the government to tell the truth of the ecological breakdown that's going on, and it will get worse and worse, and it's accelerating. And don't believe me, believe the science. Listen to the scientists and act on their advice. That's what we need to do.
Join the rebellion!
This next video was recommended a speech by a fellow activist to kick off some of the vibes. I think I need to reload it. Hold on. Be with you in a sec. Welcome to everyone that's joined. Well, I can't fit everyone on the same screen. Cool.
As the mantle.
Alright, here it is.
We are the last generation.
Sergio, it's not shared.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. Oh, it sucks because. Okay, ready? immeasurably. Now our generation has the mantle of revolution to ensure that we don't all start dead. Our generation will free many of our children and send our young boys to war with a final sorrowful kiss. Our children's mantle is to hold on for dear life and try desperately to revive our life support systems when they're not scavenging for food. The damage is done. That doesn't mean we give up. It means we scream with the fury of the mother after feeling the final breath of her child. It means we pack a bag and head to the capital city where her children are being sentenced to death with no thought of returning, only for vengeance and victory. If we keep using the tactics our parents tried and failed with, we will have to bury all of our children and say goodbye to a universe with consciousness and the complex beauty of life. We are the last generation. We accept our destiny and we call for non-violent revolution in all capitals. And with the fury of a mother without children, we will rise to any challenge we must to force our treasonous governments into submission. Cute. Welcome everyone to the Essence of Rebellion workshop. We have some special guests, which I'll introduce soon. But we have about an hour and a half cut out for this session. Yeah, and I would just like to acknowledge before we get started that we are meeting on the stolen land of the people of this continent and has been settled illegally without the consent and with the genocide of the Aboriginal people that called this place home for tens of thousands of years before us. And we very much, as part of being in a rebellion against the Australian government, are joining in a rebellion that's been raging for over 250 years, and we'd like to pay respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Okay, so we'll introduce our speakers. We'll go Liam, Joel, and then Roger. They will talk for 10 to 15 minutes on some sort of key aspects of what it is to have a rebellion, and really what we're interested in here as we're leading up to the March 22 rebellion here in Australia is what actually happens, right? Like how do you plan it, right? And what are you looking for? Yeah, so they'll be going through some of those things. With these, we're not going to have a question round per se, but if you can use the chat to personally message me, Sergio, I will see those questions, and if it steers the discussion in the right direction, then I might forward them to our speakers. So speaking of our speakers, I would like our speakers to introduce each other. So if Liam can introduce Joel, and Joel can introduce Roger, and Roger can introduce Joel. No, Liam. Yeah. Yeah. Does that sound good, speakers?
I can't remember who's going first.
Yeah. Sure.
We're going
Does
Liam.
that mean I'm introducing Liam?
Yeah,
now?
but at the And Liam goes first. I'll tell you.
Yeah, good for some improv. Yeah, so Joel, there's too many people on this call to even see where you are on the screen, but good morning. Joel is someone who is good, very, very good with systems, and jumped into XR with like more enthusiasm than many, and worked his fucking ass off to make 2 rebellions happen in 2019, and to really work out the system where you can make something happen where you know, both of the rebellions couldn't have happened without thousands and thousands of people, and Joel sat there and worked out a way for those thousands and thousands of people to have a place in the rebellion, and how they could all fit together to create something beautiful. So yeah, very happy and very lucky to have him with us this morning. Joel.
Am I introducing Roger or Liam? Thanks, Liam. I think I'm doing Roger, right?
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, this is an easy one to introduce, as you probably all know.
Sorry. I fucked up. Rosa.
Oh. Okay. Shall I just go ahead and introduce Roger? Is that what I was doing? I can't remember now. Yes. Roger is to blame for so much trouble in the UK, and so much trouble that has caused so much change, and is somewhere between a revolutionary, a cult leader, and just a genuinely deeply humane person who has come from his humanity to follow it to its logical conclusions. Throughout my experience of Extinction Rebellion was was both holding a huge amount of the space of what we were planning, but also constantly throwing maverick curveballs and grenades back into the space he was holding to keep the whole thing live and active. And I think, it's been a huge inspiration to me working with him. So if you don't know the story, basically Roger is the key innovator behind many of the tactics that Extinction Rebellion used that helped us find this sort of sweet spot space that made those rebellions in 2019 so enormous and so effective. So I'll pass over to Roger.
Thanks, Joel. So I'm introducing Liam. So me and Liam go back to the hard, unrewarding days before Extinction Rebellion, when there were 20 people blocking a road asking to change the world and no one was listening. And I'm sure a lot of people know how that feels. And we worked together in Rising Up, which was the organization that set up Extinction Rebellion. And so we go back a long way. And since then, we've basically rubbed shoulders and not rubbed shoulders and different sorts of jobs. But Liam was responsible, along with myself and various other people, I suppose, in making a critical decision in April 2019 for going for the most high risk option in order to get the most high return. And in a way, that's one of the things we're going to be trying to communicate to you guys, is we don't have time to not go for the highest risk, highest return option. And that produced the biggest act of civil disobedience in British history in April 2019. So if those 4 or 5 people, including me and Liam, hadn't been in the room, then we wouldn't be sitting here today. And since then, Liam's gone on to do more action design stuff, but also media and messaging, which I think is what he does now in XR. He's also a great guy.
Yeah, thanks so much. Cool. Well, some housekeeping things for people that just joined. This meeting is scheduled to go until for an hour and a half, so whatever time that is, an hour and a half from when it started. In terms of the speakers, we're not going to have a question round per se, but if you can message me privately in the chat, then I may forward those questions to the speakers, if it makes sense. I think that was it. Oh yes, and just please stay muted when you're not talking. So that's it. Liam, take it away. Talk about all the things to do with the April Rebellion, how it all happened and all that.
Hi. Yeah, so yeah, I've got a lot of things to try and cover. But I guess just to start with, yeah, through working in the media for XR now, I've been doing a lot more looking at data rather than just planning magical happenings like putting a boat in the middle of a street. And I've recently been looking at the data, which basically shows how many people in the world have looked at the term Extinction Rebellion and when. And there's essentially two big spikes on that chart. One is April and one is October 2019. And in some ways it's not surprising at all. And in other ways, I think it's really useful to, when we debrief these kinds of rebellions, to make sure that we look at the sort of rational analysis of did the strategy work or not, rather than just look at the emotional debrief, which is also important, but you leave a rebellion feeling absolutely exhausted and you absolutely don't know if you've changed anything yet. And so it's impossible really to look at that sort of rational analysis of if the strategy worked until you sort of look at some of that hard data. And I think it's really clear that April and October did something that no other Extinction Rebellion actions have done, in terms of shifting the Overton window, in terms of getting the public interested, in terms of getting politics and the media to talk about this. And I think that's because Extinction Rebellion was set up as this umbrella campaign, right? Rather than the previous things we'd done in the UK where we focused on the fracking companies, or we focused on one government policy, or we went off and targeted the oil companies over here in small acts of direct action with small groups of people. Extinction Rebellion was this umbrella canopy that said, no, this is a fucking emergency. We're totally fucked if we don't do anything about it now. And we need everyone who cares about the ecological collapse and the climate breakdown to come together under this one umbrella. And I think April, in the way that XR is an umbrella movement, April and October were umbrella actions. We came together in the same space with the families doing the craft activities, with the grannies, some of whom had been in the peace movement, who knew what it meant to get arrested for something that you believe in. We came together with the sort of hardcore direct action people who wanted to stick their arms in tubes and lock onto trucks. And we had the music and the art and the visioning pieces that represented why we were there and what we were there, that attracted thousands of people to come down every day to what, as Roger just said, is some of the largest civil disobedience ever in the UK. And they were all there together in one space. And you just, when you have the families group go off and do a fluffy action where they make birdhouses over here, and you have the direct action group go over and throw paint or lock onto the Shell HQ over there, you just don't get that same effect at all. We don't see any of those spikes happening in the data, and what we don't have is this umbrella movement or these umbrella kind of actions, which XR have come to call rebellions. Obviously, we're always in active rebellion against our government, but what we're talking about today is, 7 days or 2 weeks in the street day after day, doing the same simple thing of just being there in active rebellion, in view of the public, for anyone to come and join us. So Sergio wanted us to talk a little bit about what actually happens, you know, inside those rebellions. So you've done your mass mobilizing, you've been and talked around the country, you've organized coaches for people to come down, you've tried to find places for people to stay who can't be on the street all hours of the day. But what actually happens in that rebellion? So with April, you know, we'd never done this before. We had no idea if any of it was going to work. We'd taken advice from people with activist experience of the last 20 years. All of them thought this is absolutely impossible. The police will shut this down within hours. And we said, okay, that's good advice, and we're still going to do it. We had people who had, you know, music experience and festivals experience, people who all sorts of skills came to help us. And they also said, okay, we've no idea how to do this. Okay, we said, we're going to do it anyway. So actually what we had planned for ahead of the rebellion was a bunch of spin-off actions where people would go out from the 4 sites that we had in London, and start blocking other roads and start going up this chain of sort of disobedient tactics. None of those happened, but we did set up 4 sites for over a week in central London, something that we didn't think we'd do and has never been done before. In terms of music and arts and stuff, I think we'd planned for, I mean, Joel knows this better than me, but I think we'd planned for about 2 days of music and arts programming. In the end, we were at some sites for about 2 weeks. So all of that happened sort of in process of rebellion. You know, we had people calling up their friends, people just showing up with a guitar. We had people, you know, trying to have private meetings with, you know, famous bands who suddenly wanted to come and join us on the streets. So all of that sort of just happened during the thing. So we had no plan for the music, and yet all of that happened. But what we didn't really account for, but what I think looking back was actually very significant for XR, is with Extinction Rebellion, we're trying to fight against this existential threat to humanity, and we're trying to push for you know, wide-reaching government action in every part of government. We need something to happen about this, and it's very different from the street revolutions we see where they're fighting directly against state repression that they can see in the street there every day. And so what those sites did, and why people got so attached to holding them, was they became a dramatization of our demands to government. Each site represented one of our demands, and people kind of believed in those sites as a representation of that pressure on government. And people, you know, put their heart and soul and their emotion into the willing for climate action now, into the holding of those sites. And I think that dramatization played out there with the with holding those sites and people getting arrested and then coming back the next day and getting arrested again because they believed in that emotional attachment. So this needs to happen now. Sorry, Sergio, did you say something?
No, I didn't. But I was actually, since we're talking about holding sites, I was wondering if you could share the sort of story about when you got to the tipping point of police repression and were able to hold the bridge with, what, 30 people on it because the police just stopped arresting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes back to this umbrella idea. I think the state and the police are so used to dealing with either the small scale direct action or the big fluffy protest march that goes away in about 3 hours, right? And what they hadn't counted on is the fact that it was so obviously a diverse crowd. I mean, XR gets slated for its lack of diversity, But if you actually look at any other protest movement, and I've been around in protest movements in the UK for the last 10 years, I have never seen this kind of diversity. To have families sitting in the middle of a road doing like arts and craft, to have like people in their 20s sitting around listening to music, and to have, you know, a bunch of teenagers and old crusty anarchists locked onto a truck all in the same space is a complete headfuck for the police. How do you come in with the hard repression that you need to move people off the road if you've got people doing arts and crafts over there, and you've got the first line of people sitting down to be arrested are all, you know, in their 70s, and we're in the peace movement? You just can't respond in the same way that they're used to dealing with typical small-scale direct action, or your mass fluffy protest that goes away in a few hours. So I think what happened was the police just didn't know how to deal with this new situation. But I think we also saw through this, you know, non-violent, like strictly sticking to the non-violence and just sitting in the road, it takes the police a hell of a lot of time to remove each individual, because they have to speak to you respectfully. They have to ask you whether you want to leave. You're not even locked onto anything, so why aren't you just leaving? They don't understand your emotional connection to this cause. It takes hours and hours to process each and every individual one. And we got to the point where people were being sent to police stations outside of London. So the sheer amount of people being arrested was also causing them a bureaucratic nightmare, which meant we got to this situation where you could have a site almost cleared of people, and by the time the bureaucracy had processed those people out of the cells and made more space to arrest more people had come and joined that site and were also willing to come and sit down in the road. And that's this kind of where you get this moment of the whirlwind. I mean, walking around the sites in the middle of the night, you'd bump into people that you had, you know, friends from university or from your local, like, borough, were just sitting in the road in the middle of the night. You had no idea they were involved in Extinction Rebellion. In some ways they weren't. They'd just heard about it and come down because it was going on for day after day. And that's something that you'll never get with those, you know, secretive, one day, small scale direct actions. There's no way for people to come and be, even if they are inspired, there's no way for them to feel like they can be involved. The difference with April was we openly said, we're doing this on this day, we'll be at these places in central London, and we'll be there for 2 weeks. So you can come down anytime and join us. And this is the difference that you get with open organizing and strictly sticking to that non-violent principles in the action. But I think, yeah, it's really important that if you look at then October, when we had, you know, thousands more people, and Joel will talk a bit more about October soon, we had enough people that we could then go and do some of those other direct actions that weren't possible in April, but we still had those umbrella spaces where all these different people could sit together, and in that situation the police, you know, put a London-wide ban on the whole protests, and so you start to get that backfiring effect, which I think is why October again got even more interest than April in some ways, because we had the state not being able to deal with this and coming in with a response that was way too harsh for the fact that it was this umbrella space and this non-violent space. And we also had people going off and doing, you know, the more radical, more risky, more sacrificial actions at the same time, which gained those news stories to get people talking about us and coming and joining us.
Thanks, Liam. Before we move on to Joel, would like you to answer a sort of question that we got from the crowd, which is, how did you manage to get all these people in the first place? And I guess since I sort of know the answer to this, which is like you weren't sure if you had enough people, it would also be good to talk briefly about, you know, like what it took to basically like say we were going to hold 4 sites and not know what was going to happen, and just go with it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we had some data from the mobilizers on how many people were going to come, but even till a few weeks before, that was like very small numbers officially coming. But the interesting thing with Extinction Rebellion is it seems to have always been the case, unlike if you hold a party and 10 people say they're coming on Facebook, that means probably 3 people are going to come to your party, right? With Extinction Rebellion, if for some reason, if 100 people say they're coming on Facebook, that's more likely to mean 500 or 1,000 people actually show up in reality. I'm not sure why that is. Working on social media now, it's quite an interesting phenomenon. But I think essentially we took advice from lots of different people. I think what's also interesting about why April and October did so well is that, I get to feel a bit like, oh, I worked on April and October. That's great that they did so well. But then I realized that actually both April and October took thousands and thousands of people to make them happen. There were so many people working on those actions in a way that never happens on these small scale actions. And I think by having those thousands and thousands of people putting like hours and hours of work into something, that there's no way that they're not going to be telling their friends and their family about this thing that they're involved in. It is this open organizing situation, and by putting out that date very publicly, as Sergio reminded me last night, from months before we were announcing the April date and telling people come on this day. So we just had to essentially trust the experiment was worth trying. As Roger said, like it was a risk worth taking. I think if you're not gonna, we have no idea whether the experiment of Extinction Rebellion was going to do what it did, and we have no idea whether it's going to do what it needs to do in the future. But we had to have enough faith, I guess, and we had to be daring enough to go for the impossible, that we were willing to really commit to trying out the experiment to the fullest, which means fully open organizing, which means going for the impossible, and it means welcoming thousands of people to come and join you in non-violent civil disobedience in a way that is totally different to a protest. And how we kept those people there and kept people coming was through having it be this visioning space where people could sit together and eat, they could sit together and do a workshop, they could bring their kids and do arts crafts, they could listen to music and dance together, all at the same time as, hundreds of people an hour were being arrested and making that sacrifice in front of those hundreds of people who might have been completely brand new to the movement. They were getting to witness the people who were already committed to make that sacrifice of being arrested right there and then. And some of them were then being inspired to join them that same week in doing that.
Great. Thank you so much, Liam. And Joel, would you like to kick us off with October and some of the shenanigans there?
Sorry, Sergey. Sergey, is it about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes for me? Is that what you?
Yeah.
Yeah, sweet. Hi, guys. Yeah. So I'll just, it might be quickly useful to throw in because it's relevant to how October works as well. When I joined Extinction Rebellion in the UK, when I walked into the office for the first time, the thing that just kept being said was April the 15th, take 2 weeks off work. We're going to be there. There was instantly this sense of absolute inevitability that there was just nothing else you should be doing with your life other than being at this one place. And there was this wonderful holding of two contradictions, which was that April would be the last rebellion that would definitely bring down the government, but also it doesn't matter if it doesn't because we'll just do another one. Like both those things were held. So April got so much love, like built this huge sense of community, like the kind of like mythic memories that people built up of like holding Waterloo Bridge, of like being glued to the pink boat, of like maybe they were allowed on the pink boat for a minute, like these things, like the kind of sense of like that a new kind of time had started, like mythic time had opened in the UK for a few months, built up towards October, and it felt like in those few months in between that things were just like that there's a lot of buoyancy and like magic energy behind it. But that meant that now there was lots and lots of people wanting to get involved, and whilst in April the action decisions, it was like 15-ish of us, with kind of Liam, Roger and me, and probably about 15 total. We're all in the room like 2 days before going like, should we do 4 sites? Should we just do 1 site, sort of thing? It was like that decision was like really last minute with the regions coming in. From October, like 3 months before, we were already assigning sites. So like it was way in advance that we knew exactly what roads that we were going to be blocked. And that also meant that we had this date, October the 7th. And this phrase that's Roger's responsible for, that we're going to bring down the government. Again, it was like jokey. Was it serious? No one really knows, but it had this like playful seriousness to it, that now everyone was going to bring down the government on the 7th of October. And there was nothing else you should be doing with your life at this point. And you knew that we said take 2 weeks off work, but also it was quit your job, quit everything, sell your possessions. We're going down there and we're holding out as long as it takes. And I know that sounds, because there was a lightheartedness to it, it meant more people could participate. But like, I truly believed it, and we really did have that sense of like, we're in it for as long as it takes. And I think that was absolutely crucial. So one thing that was really important was setting up the momentum for October the 7th. It was there naturally, but then there were some things that were very consciously done to help build this sense of like kind of rising stuff, which got us in the press almost like every couple of days throughout that summer building up to October, was that there's something was coming, and sometimes big spikes. So there was having this huge prophetic target, the big ask, we're going to go down there. And we started using phrases like, we're going to shut down London, not we're going to hold some sites, we're going to shut down the entire city, or we're going to bring London to a standstill. And we were completely open about the tactics that we'd be using. And again, emphasizing that they were the mass participation, but low entry. So sitting in the roads. So we're going to go to London, we're going to sit in the roads. So we go to talk, we were doing talks, we were getting, because it was framed in the right way, that it was mass participation with this huge ask, but low level action. We even had big celebrities putting their name to it, saying like, yeah, we had one of the Spice Girls, like I gave a talk to one of the Spice Girls and she was like, yeah, I'm going to shut down London. Like, it was bizarre, like, but it was because there was that right level of like, it's not scary, spicy action, but it is also a huge ask that we're going to go for. So it had those both things together. So there were build-up actions. So there was about a week before, a group got a fire engine and drove it up to the Treasury, where all the money's managed in the UK, and sprayed fake blood all over it. That caused outrage in the right-wing press, loads of people talking about it. And in the press every time, October the 7th, there's this huge thing coming, sort of thing. So you had this sense. A few days before, we organised a press conference, and the press conference, literally, we had a slideshow on the wall showing the map of the roads that we were going to block. I was live on TV briefly going, we're going to block these roads here, and then we're going to do this sort of thing. So it was completely open. There was nothing in the dark. So it meant that even if you'd never gone to an Extinction Rebellion local group, if you watched the news, you'd see the map and you could just set your clock and go, well, it's very simple. I'm going to go on October the 7th. I'm going to go roughly to that bit of London and I'll sit down in the road. And I've been part of this epic moment. That was all you needed. You didn't need any specialist knowledge, activist lingo, anything else. You were just going to go to London on October the 7th. So that helped. Lots of local groups would do some local actions. They were kind of running their own little marches around town if they could. This is difficult in COVID, obviously, but like to try and build up stuff. And then this was the crucial thing. Whilst in April, we had 4 sites that had been chosen by the original action planners, and then we kind of divided them up by general region. It became much more like a kind of tribal gathering in October. And what we did is early on, Liam and a few other people chose which sites would be best, and then handed that responsibility completely over to a region. And so in total, we had 11 of those sites in the end. And to get them all involved, the crucial underlying thing was this radical participation thing. So it was like, it's your site, and now you can do whatever you like with it. And here's the money. If we've got some money, here's the donation. So take this on. And from the day you take it on the morning of October the 7th, you're now autonomous. You make decisions. There's no central body that's going to tell you to leave your site or to do something different. You and your tribe are coming from your bit of the country, and you're going to hold it. and the only thing that we all agree on is that we're going to be non-violent and hold it for as long as possible. And so that was a kind of crucial bit of it. So there's a very practical way that we did that. We used Google Docs. So we had a big spreadsheet, and we basically created a template which listed all the suggested working groups, like the roles that you would need to run like a kind of mini encampment in London. So like sanitation, stage, sound, performers, musicians, action design. It actually ran, we can send you the spreadsheet if you want, it ran like 30 kind of suggested groups you could have. But as a way to quickly spread this, we came up with like 5 lead roles to manage the different main areas. So like arts, action design, arrestee support kind of stuff. I can't actually remember what the other ones were now. And so basically what that meant is to get this going for each of the sites, we just had to find 5 people from each region, or even 1 person to find 5 people, and then those 5 people find the people for the groups, and then those people in the groups find people for their groups. And so within a space of weeks, it went from these empty spreadsheets to over 700 people who put their names and their details on a public facing document saying, I'm an organizer for Extinction Rebellion. So we had 700 organizers of the rebellion. And so this open public organizing was like crucial, because it built so much confidence that that anything could happen, and that everyone was like in this together. Some people started using code names, but barely anyone. Most people put their full names, details. I'm up there. I'm taking this role, and I'm organizing this thing. So the one crucial thing was, though, that we did centralize some things. So things like food. There was like a kind of central kitchen that was set up. Providing tents. It was just like buying loads and loads of tents because the weather was wet. We had rebel riders, people on bicycles who could like move stuff between sites. And the most important centralized thing was legal support and arrestee support. So we had this very good system for when people were arrested, their names were tracked on the streets. And we can talk more about this useful. But essentially what it meant is they were supported the whole way through, and when they came out of the police station, no matter which police station they were sent to, even if it was somewhere outside of London, someone would be there outside to meet them. And that was such a crucial piece of the whole thing when we got there. So yeah, on first day, the site take was very different, very chaotic. So this is an interesting thing just tactically to learn. So it must be about 20,000 people, I think in the end, 20, 30,000 people, we don't really know, all turned up and took their 11 sites. But the police had a different tactic in October, and they realized that actually one of the best things to do to keep us there for as little time as possible was actually to first just seize all of our stuff. So in April, we had a boat, we had tents, and the police would be arresting people whilst we were like setting up new tents in the middle of the street, or like bringing in new sound equipment. I mean, at one of the sites in April, we even had a whole solar farm out the back of the stage, so we could run the stage off renewable energy. And like the police were like, yeah, that's fine, we're just going to arrest people. In October, they went straight for the stuff. So any big infrastructure, they just came in and they dragged out. Nearly led to some moments where people broke non-violence, and that's something to be aware of, that people got really attached to the stuff because they spent months or weeks working on building a lovely sculpture, and then they were like, fuck you, police, I'm not letting you take my sculpture, that was potentially could have been dodgy. The crucial thing was 300 arrests on that first day. The next day, 300 arrests. The next day, 300 arrests. The next day, 300 arrests. And it would seem that was the capacity that they could deal with on top of the other. So what it meant was that although I think like one site or 1 or 2 sites fell on that first day, they just couldn't keep taking other ones because we were just filling the decks every time. And the arrests would stop by somewhere kind of mid-evening. And then you had the sites overnight and everyone could kind of bed down. It would be quite cozy. And I think one of the crucial things about it was that there was a culture of rearrest as well. So people weren't just coming down to do like, I'm going to come and do my arrest, and then I can tell my kids I got arrested for Extinction Rebellion. There was part of the build up to it, that big prophetic ask meant that you were going to come back regardless, but also it was kind of addictive because you'd get arrested, you'd come out of the cell quite quickly because they had so many, they were trying to process you, and then outside there'd be like 5-10 rebels with like food and like drink and cigarettes sometimes as well, like being like, hey, well done, and you'd be like, yeah, like this. And actually I know loads of people went straight from the police station because they'd had a nice sleep straight back down to get arrested all over again on the streets, and sort of be sort of cycled through. you know, that was alongside, of course, lots of people who weren't getting arrested at all. So you did have this spectrum of action. And then this is the other crucial thing that we did manage to get going in October that, as Liam said, had been planned for April, but we didn't take off so much back then, was to have what we called the satellite actions. Now, to plan other actions other than the site holding, we had encouraged all of the individual groups who had their own tribe to think about their site as a base to go and plan other actions. And that did happen a bit, but actually in the end, for most of them, just the deal of like holding a site was stressful enough. But thankfully there was a core team of people who had some experience, either really experienced activists like Liam, or people who had experience from the first 6 months of that year doing stuff, who were thinking ahead to planning big spicy actions. So basically at the very beginning of the week, we came up with a plan to shut down City Airport, which is the sort of main business airport in London. So it was a very good target because it was where it pretty much exclusively bankers and big business people do frequent flying out of London. And so lots of actions like this happen. This is just quite a good example of how we did this, and it could have been planned in advance. We went round the sites every day for the first few days of the rebellion, giving public briefings. So we stood up and we knew there'd be, even when there were police there, we would say, guys, so on this day, you know, on the Thursday, we're going to go to City Airport and we're going to shut it down. And here's a map of all the bits you need to do. There's going to be buses leaving at this point. If you don't get a bus, get a taxi. If you don't get a taxi, get a train. And we had then a Pied Piper person to lead people from the sites that morning. So on Thursday morning, people went around to each of the sites, said, we're going to City Airport, gathered a crowd, all took different routes and all headed there. And in the end, that was big mass participation, sat down in the road, sat down in the City Airport terminal. But also we'd planned a few kind of spicy elements as well. So we had a few people had bought tickets and got dressed up as passengers, went through, and I was one of them, glued ourselves to the checkout security terminals so that you can get through the gates. And then I don't know if you saw, but the absolutely epic kind of end of the scale was a guy called James Brown went through was meant to be one of the people of the passengers, but just got carried away, went through and jumped on top of the plane and glued himself to the top of the plane. And so by this point, by the end of the first week of the rebellion, from the police's point of view, there was just this sense of like kind of like huge confidence. They're just doing these big things confidently because they can, but also like surprise chaos elements as well. So people were just spontaneously setting up new roadblocks in places using tripods. So that only needed like 5 people, but that was the hardcore direct action people now were like kind of throwing like spicy Tabasco on top of an otherwise like big nourishing dish that we'd already set up. And the police just like, fuck, where's this all coming from? So there's new stuff just like popping up all over the place. And I think it was that contribution of big sites being held, cells being filled, and just spontaneous, like, I don't know where this stuff's coming from, that led to the crucial thing that October did achieve, which was, as Liam said, they used a piece of legislation, which we refer to shorthand as Section 14, but it's of the Public Order Act over here, to basically ban us from the city. And it was an extraordinary thing to do. So from the very first day, they'd said we can only protest on one place, Trafalgar Square, off the roads. And then by the end of that first week, they just said, you're out. No one with Extinction Rebellion, like anything, is even allowed in the city, which was an amazing thing to get them to do that. It was later challenged by the High Court. It turned out to be illegal. But even before that, what happened was that was such a clear overstep that it did create a small version of the kind of backlash effect that you see when people are doing non-violence against violent regimes, in as much as you got the kind of all those people who were kind of at home going, yeah, I support this, suddenly started to go, that's outrageous, you can't ban these people. And we even had some of the NGO world kind of come down and show support for the rebellion and start doing it. And we'll never know what happens next, because at that point we had the tube action happen, which went completely the other way. And we had people stand on top of tube trains, which had worked really well before, but this time one of them caused this violent backlash, which whole nother debate. But unfortunately, partly because where it was, the demographics where it was, that lost us the public support that we just built at that moment. So it's kind of ooh, and then ooh, and that's kind of where, that's almost like the tone XR is settled in right now, is like somewhere between loved and hated by the British public, and they can't quite make up their minds. But yeah, I think the final thing I'd just say about the reason October, the best bits about October was just the sense that this was, that you as quickly as possible said, hey, do you want to be responsible for this? Okay, cool, you're responsible. And then that's it. There was no trying to hold this like hierarchy of decision making and power over other people once you'd handed stuff over. So this radical participation, anyone with no experience can be one of those 700 people on the spreadsheet organising, or turn up and take one of their roles if they'd lost it, if they'd been arrested or something. Yeah. All right. Sorry, I've played too much. Hand over to Roger.
That was great. Thanks so much, Joe. Yeah, Roger.
Yeah, thank you very much, Liam, Joel, and hello everyone. Thanks for inviting me and thanks for coming. I'm going to hopefully keep it down to 10 minutes of what I'm going to call the remorseless and undeniable logic of the rebellion. And I think that's what my understanding of this session is to understand the essence, the fundamental argument for rebellion at this point in human history. And
Hey, Roger.
I've been helping, can you hear me?
Your fan's doing the thing. I think you have to just jiggle it.
What?
Is that right? You know does no one else hear that? Sorry, it must.
Okay, so I've been helping with mobilisation in Australia for about 6-9 months. So I started this work with you guys with one concrete fact in mind, which is that the forest fires that destroyed 20% of Australian forest in 2020 will be a regular event in 20 years' time, according to the peer-reviewed literature. And 20 years after that, that will constitute a cool summer. So for me, that's the fact I remember every time I do stuff in Australia. In other words, for me and for all of us, we have to remember that we're not here to do something abstract like save the world or save the planet. We're here to prevent 20% of Australian forests burning down on an average year, every year within 2 decades, which is the difference between 2020 and 2000. And we know that's not long. So really, for me, Extinction Rebellion is about a concrete threat requiring a concrete response. It's nothing vague or abstract. What we're talking about is the evacuation of Sydney within 2 decades. What we're talking about is the absolute betrayal of the Indigenous population through the destruction of the Australian landmass within 20 years. It's absolutely horrific and it's absolutely immoral. The second thing to concretely understand is we do not have the time. The single biggest strategic determinant of what we're doing is based upon the reality that we do not have the time to continue failing, because that is set by the geophysics. It's not a rhetorical statement, it's a physical statement that within 5 years, 10 years at the maximum, or maybe we've lost it already, it will be too late for any human agency to prevent the complete evacuation of the Australian subcontinent within 4 decades. So that means we have to be absolutely ruthless and clear with ourselves that we have to do what is necessary to transform the economy and politics of Australia this year or next year. That's the project. And what that means is that we have to do what is necessary regardless of the risk. And there's a fundamental difference between Extinction Rebellion and the environmentalist strategy, in the same sense that if you're trying to get over a 10-foot wall, you can jump high, you can jump to 6 foot, you can jump to 8 foot, but it doesn't matter. You're still going to destroy the continent. What is required to get over a 10-foot wall is to go and get a ladder. Going to get the ladder is a fundamentally different strategy. Okay? You can jump as high as you can, but it doesn't matter. The only thing that's going to save you is getting the ladder. So what this means concretely is protest is jumping, going to get the ladder is civil resistance. There's a fundamental difference between protest and civil resistance. Protest is asking for change. Civil resistance is creating the change through material struggle. Two very different things. When you go to a city and sit in the road for 2 weeks, you create the material disruption that puts you in the ballpark of creating material change. Material change has a very concrete definition. It means that the Australian government is forced to enact legislation to decarbonise the Australian economy now, right? It has a direct correlation to the civil rights movement in the United States in the 60s, where for 70 years they protested, and in 1958 they moved into civil resistance. And in 7 years, they forced the federal government to enact a series of impossible, inverted commas, legislation to remove institutional racism in the Deep South. This is the model of Extinction Rebellion. It's forcing governments through material resistance. Material resistance in most eventualities requires a model of going to the city and staying there. Again, I'll give you the concrete numbers. You need to engage in this form of resistance to the point of having 2,000 arrests or thereabouts. In the UK, it's 3,000 arrests. In the United States, the state legislatures enacted legislation when there was 10,000 arrests through Black Lives Matter last year. Okay, so there's a non-linear point at which you get a result. So the point I'm trying to communicate here is we're gathered here today in order for me and hopefully others to persuade ourselves that you have to go to the Australian Extinction Rebellion movement in a position of leadership. And what leadership fundamentally requires is to tell the brutal truth of what is happening, what is necessary, and to demand that people step up. And it's that which created Extinction Rebellion in the UK. It was the proposition that we do something that will be successful, right? It wasn't a continuation of the environmental movement. It was an argument. And I will put at the end of this 10-minute talk, the video that drove that argument that 35,000 people looked at before April. And I laid out clearly the remorseless moral and material logic of what Extinction Rebellion is about. And I think what you need to do is to stand up, literally stand up in your meetings and bang out this logic, right? This remorseless logic. If we don't get this job done in 2 years, we're done for. The way we get this job done is by going to the cities, not by going to companies, not by getting distracted. We sit in the road, we get arrested, we get let out, and we go back into the road. So what I would suggest is you have emergency meetings in the States and you make that proposition that you do what's necessary, which is say you will be going to camp to Sydney, to Melbourne for 2 weeks, right? You've only got 100 people going, but you still say you're going for 2 weeks because 1 week isn't enough, right? The literature knows that. It's 2 weeks. It's usually 10 to 14 days to create a government response because that's what exhausts the police. It doesn't matter that you've only got 200 people because once people have been there for 3 days, then as Joel says, they all decide to stay longer. There's no material limit, right? People just lose their jobs. So what, right? We're looking at the end of Australia. We're looking at the betrayal of the Indigenous people. We're looking at the betrayal of all our ancestors. We're looking at the betrayal of our children. Who gives a damn, right? You're 14 days away from legislative change. Once people get that in their head, they come out to the police station and they go back into the road. And as Joel says, you will materially overcome the police in a neoliberal, austerity-based Western state, because the police do not have the resources to maintain a continual arrest response for more than 14 days in a Western democracy. So that's it, right? It's super concrete. And that's what's driven the growth of Extinction Rebellion around the world. If we lose that concreteness, then we go into all sorts of confusion. And this, as I said, has to be driven by the 31 of you in this room, right? I mean, I'm being direct because I want to survive. I want my children to survive, right? I'm begging you to do this work, to stand up. At the moment, you've got Sergio, right? You need 5 Sergios, that you're there. There's 1 or 2 of you that can stand up and do a Sergio routine. That's what you need to do. That's my challenge. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. There's a lot to take in. A bit on the spot as well. Cool. Okay. Well, I mean, great. Well, I'll looks like we're thinking of the exact same lines because we know how to do a rebellion. It seems. Yeah, we're going to end this meeting with a proposition, and Roger has basically laid out the proposition. I organize here, and I know the hardship that we've gone through. With people sort of losing faith with COVID and that kind of stuff. People feeling a little bit stretched for capacity and having a fear of doing a rebellion. So rather than that, they are sort of planning lots of protests. So I'm going to go through basically a model of momentum-driven organizing that sort of solves these problems, I say. And I mean, also, I have a little bit of, I'm not sort of talking out of my ass. So I might just establish my credibility before I begin. So of course, here in Brisbane, there's lots of people that sort of make it happen. Not going to forget those people. But yeah, so in June of 2019, we'd have about 15 people that were like actively sort of doing work, sort of organizing work that we've got through doing heading for extinction talks and stuff like that. We called out to the media that we were going to shut down Brisbane City on August the 6th after doing like some small like protests, and then we started doing like blocking roads, which, as everyone here knows, was totally taboo at the time. It starts with 2 people, happened to be myself and Ebony, and
Sergio?
Yeah.
I've got to go.
No worries.
But I just want to say good luck, everyone, and thanks so much for all the work you're doing. And I'll see you all around.
I'll take the mantle. 1 week after, we do another flashy thing with like 4 people, and then we start to do, invite people to doing actions publicly. So we start doing swarms on a regular basis where we don't just leave the road. We ask people when we're going to leave the road. Are you going to leave or are you going to stay? And every time we go on, there's a few people that are not coming off, right? And they go to the watch house, and we get 10 people arrested each time that we sort of did that. And that developed this culture within sort of 4 weeks that something is actually going to happen, and we actually might be able to shut down Brisbane City. Anyway, fast forward to Rebellion Day, about 6 weeks after we announced this, and 100 people got arrested. We filled up the watch house. The police stopped arresting us, but of course, it was a 1-day event, so we all went home. Anyway, the validity there is, you can easily grow a significant movement in 5 weeks. Okay, so here's the bones of it. So there are 3 pillars of a rebellion: sort of media, actions, and outreach or mobilization. You always start with action. A group, so that for example, a group does an action. Arrestable roadblocks are the most effective because they're taboo. That action gets attention on traditional and social media. In the media content, you explain clearly your intent for having a rebellion with a set date, like Liam was talking about, um, and um, and you have a clear path of joining you. So whether it's heading for extinction talks or at least the next big event. Sorry, I lost myself. Yeah. So, and in your social media posts, you in each post you have a link to, whether it's an online Zoom recruitment, or if it's a heading for extinction talk. So that means that your actions are getting you attention, and when people come to those sessions, the intention is very clear. You get them into one of the working groups, and you make it clear that that we have to have more action to get more people, right? So their job now that they've joined is to do an arrestable action within the fortnight. And again, you use those actions to get people's attentions. You direct that action into training and induction to do more actions. So of course, the shorter this like loop happens, the better, and the more cycles going at once, the faster you grow. So a sort of minimum aim is to have 1 arrestable action per week and scale that up as you approach the rebellion period that you've set in advance. And this momentum building, this action, recruitment, I forgot media, action that creates media, that creates recruitment. This is the primary operation between the rebellion periods. If the planning for the rebellion period is taking up a whole bunch of space, so you can't do that, you need to simplify it, because you're never going to succeed the rebellion period, because you need to grow that momentum. As I'm sure I don't have to convince you too hard, because we all know the situation that we're in. So a sort of helpful tip here is proximity. So the proximity to the next step must be close, and the proximity to the next rebellion period must also be close. By the time that each action takes place, there must already be another one ready to go, or being sort of getting volunteers to participate in. Yeah, so and in terms of in your rebellion periods, there also must be another rebellion period on the horizon. So this is ultimately about retaining those people that you bring in. So first, you empower them by giving them autonomy within teams and getting them to embody that sense of rebellion by doing actions. And then you retain that energy by keeping things fast and furious, as Roger likes to say. So during the rebellion, as we've discussed in this meeting, it's all hands on deck, and sort of acts as this sort of mega version of the pre-rebellion sort of media action mobilization cycle. And everything's sort of happening live. Yeah, so because it's all happening live, the sort of feedback loop, as I think Liam was talking about, was is immediate, right? So the people that see that it's happening, they know that it's going to be happening tomorrow. So when they wake up tomorrow, they head down and they sit on the road with you, rather than having to sort of click on a link on a Facebook page, go to an event, training, and that kind of stuff. So the extreme proximity of an ongoing rebellion. Sorry, I have a stutter, by the way. Which is being in the street 24/7 for more than a week is the biggest opportunity for growth, which far exceeds what can be done in the sort of 5 to 10 weeks of pre-rebellion time. So yeah, in a rebellion, if you're not out on the street every day for a week, or have intention to go home as soon like at any point, it basically shatters the opportunity of growing because people know that you know that you're going to go home. So as Joel's talking about, there's like this bold action, this bold sort of statement, this bold vibe that we're here until we get the job done, and we're not leaving until our demands are met. So in terms of the best sort of time frame, every sort of 5 to 10 weeks is a pretty good time frame to keep people's attention, but still have enough time to do sort of the setup. So in those 5 to 10 weeks, don't focus much at all like what the rebellion will consist of. Like there should be some teams doing that sort of work, but your primary operations is momentum building up to that point. And of course, and that's because like the answer to what the rebellion is going to be like, what's going to happen, is a product of the work that is done up to that point. So yeah, as Roger's sort of saying, we have to shift what like we consider failing. Going out on the street for 14 days and getting arrested, 10 times in that 14 days, and only the the group only grows like double. That's not failing. That is part of winning. Failing is not taking the risk in the first place. It's going home after 3 days of actions. Failing is protesting as usual. The days of protesting is over. The things that must be in the rebellion period to have more than a zero chance of success is a constant presence for 10 to 14 days. We know this, it's in the academia, right? So the other thing is, of course, to maintain that presence, as we've seen in London, where they've done it time and time again, you have to fill up the watch house, right? So you have to be doing something illegal, both to get the backfire effect, but also to maintain it. So yeah, of course, you can add a bunch of extra sort of flavor with your bands and an airport action or something like that. But if we forget the cake, we've fucked it. So I've got a simple proposal. I actually, I'll tell a story about the proposal before I say it, but I initially had 7 days here, and Roger made me basically change it to 7 days because of his sticking with the truth. So here's the proposal for the people in the room. It's simple. The proposal is that each state commits to 14 days of rebellion from March 22 to April 5th, centered on an illegal occupation, at least one. Each state commits to not filling up the rebellion period with protests, but rather using a high frequency. Sorry, I'm saying this wrong. Don't A protest, that's not 14 days of having 14 actions. That's 14 days of coming back to the same place. Maybe it's a different place, and getting back in the road because you're making your intention clear and bold. And the other proposal is that we use high frequency action cycle between rebellions to build momentum to a rebellion that we call before or during the previous one that is going to happen within the next 5 to 10 weeks. Okay, so that's the sort of truth of it, as Roger would like to say. So to move forward with this, I'm going to be blunt. So I'm going to respond to this first, just because I'll take it as a question. People feeling like they don't have enough capacity to hold a space for 14 days. The logistics, the capacity is built during the rebellion period and before. Now, of course, if you haven't done it before, the rate that you're doing it during it is a little bit slow, but it's still way more than you could ever hope for beforehand. So what the proposal, like, I guess, means materially for people that if you think that you can't hold it, is to have a team of people, to have the rebellion consist of people that are going out on the street, all getting arrested, seeing if they can fill up the watch house and have some people hold the space overnight, and if not, coming out the next day and doing it again for 14 days. Okay, yeah, so we'll move forward with this. So basically, we'll ask any individuals, we'll start with individuals that does not want to do this. Basically, thanks for coming. You can leave now, and everyone that remains will talk about some next steps. So I've got some sort of concrete things of how to do this concretely. So I'll give you, 10 seconds. You either are in or you're out, basically. Cool. Yeah. Yep. All right. So I've got an idea of how to move forward with this. So as Roger said, call an urgent state action meeting within the next 3 days, declaring your personal intent to participate in an actual rebellion, and basically do a similar thing, right? So all members that wish to do the same, get together, decide on the most public road in the city to occupy, and at the end of that, when you've got the city, when you've got the road that you're going to occupy, get your phone out and film 1 or 2 people explaining that you're going to be there for 14 days, and you're not leaving, and to come and join you. Yeah, and put that up on Facebook and other social media. So, and of course, we will begin momentum building up to that point, so it is potentially successful, whatever that means. So to help with this, on the 8th of March, I'm inviting all action teams that have committed to having a rebellion a chance to work together in the following workshop that I'm calling Coming to the Truth, and with some mystery experts that Roger will hook up for us. They'll help us with any sort of design challenges of what that occupation might look like, helping refine whether it's the messaging or some of the tactics, and it can be a space where we'll sort of work out the nuts and bolts. But ultimately, it's quite simple. So try not to overcomplicate it. It's basically you choose a spot and you commit to staying there for 14 days. Yeah, and to start the basically the momentum cycle with action, media, and mobilization. Yeah, having done one arrestable action before the 8th of March, and yeah, to get it going. So what we'll do, since there's people that have stayed on, we've got 10 minutes to basically go around with both a checkout and a response to this proposition, and how excited you are about being involved in the rebellion. And we'll do a thing where we pass it on. So, or actually, nah, I think I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna say your name and then we'll just do it like that. I have everyone's contact, so I will send you the information for the next Coming to the Truth workshop. Okay, I'll start off with Rosa, Jared, and Ben. It's 3 in 1. So yeah, your response to it and your checkout.
Look, you've really thrown down the gauntlet, and you've thrown down a moral challenge, and I think that's what it's difficult to hear. It was, especially hearing Roger talk, like everything he's saying is true and real, and yet we're having all these difficult conversations around burnout and whatnot here, and part of me just really wants to fucking do it, and then I just think this is huge. But I think we definitely need to. You've definitely this meeting has definitely inspired me. Like, we need to get some arrestable stuff going up before March and try and do as much as we can. And thank you for all of the people who spoke for pushing it, because it's so easy to forget how fucking bad this stuff is and what we're actually doing here. It's so easy to forget that what we're facing is this massive, massive, massive thing. so I'm talking too long. I'll stop talking, Rosa, you can talk.
Yeah, good. I'm like really pumped up from this. I think it's exciting. We've had a lot of conversations in WA about whether stuff will work or not, but you know, you're just reminding us that it's necessary and we need to strive for what's necessary, not what's achievable. And thank you, Serge, for sorting this, and thanks, Joel and Liam, for talking. It's been good. And Ben is bypassing his checkout.
Thanks so much. Emily, Sig's next on the list. If you're available.
Hi. Yeah, it was really interesting to listen to. I would really love to be involved in like staying overnight if I could. The only thing that's stopping me is like fear, because I don't want to be alone in Perth City by myself, public transport not running, no way to get home. That's the last thing I want. But I'm also like, yes, we need to make this a safe space, but also a place where things happen, a place of change. We need to make it a place. Like, we need to make changes to the space by decorating it, by making it clear that this is beautiful, this is what we want, this is what's happening. And even if people are moved on, perhaps the artwork can't be. Stuff like that. So I'm really creatively trying to engage with the ideas. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily. Rosa posted in the chat, so send her a private message with your email. She'll be in contact with you tonight. Brad from Westside.
Yeah, thanks, Serge, and thanks to everyone for speaking. I love Roger's theory of change, and I back it all the way, but with one proviso: as long as the capacity's there, and we are having capacity constraints. There's no disguising that we are in somewhat of a rebuild because we lost a lot of momentum over COVID, and I think if we're limited for capacity, I think Rupert Read makes a lot of sense about more targeted actions, but. Yeah, so I think we've got to walk the line between that Rupert Read approach and when the capacity's there, just go full ball with the Roger Hallam approach. Thank you, everyone.
No worries. Thanks, Brad. Hopefully my outline will help with that. Jessica Leaderwood.
Hi. Yeah, thanks to the speakers. It was really inspiring and really helpful. Are they still there? Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Liam and Joel. Yeah, feeling inspired now. I know because there's also in Sydney, there's a few really few go-getters already starting to plan stuff there, this kind of thing exactly. So yeah, I should jump on and help them out and go there, because Newcastle definitely doesn't have capacity to do much. But I think if we just head down to Sydney, that's close, that's doable. 14 days freaks me out because I have kids. I don't know if that's impossible, but yeah, I'll try.
Yeah, thanks so much for being honest with you. Oh, and by the way, I've got some professional activists heading to Newcastle, so you'll be it'll be going off pretty soon. Daisy.
Hello. Yeah, no, I'm excited, but like I am worried about numbers. We had a really good crew from the Northern Rivers in New South Wales to begin with. Like, we've got 900 to 1,000 people on our email list, but only about 5 people come to the meetings. So we're getting rebel ringing going. I've got a load of posters. I just invite everyone and messenger to everything I'm doing, and just try and get there. We're going to come to Brisbane and stay for as long as we need to.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks so much. Maya.
Hi everyone. Great to hear the laser sharpness. Yeah, it's what it takes. So yeah, I've got to do it. Down in Melbourne, and yeah, looking forward to the Tuesday meeting of Port Phillip to knuckle down on logistics. Thanks.
Thanks. Marie, are you there? Maybe we'll go with Natasha next then. Knock, knock. Jake O'Reilly, are you there? Looks like the people with our videos are really ghosts. Okay, cool. Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Serge. It's really hard. It's really hard to know what to say. It's true. It's hard, but it's got to happen. I think talking to these UK guys is cool who've actually been there, and Serge and people. Yeah, but thanks as ever. Amazing
Thanks,
work.
Julie. And Mary. You're still muted, Mary.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking this over with people in the local XR branch, Brad and Co. I think that will help. Yeah, it's inspiring, but yeah, a lot to think about. Thanks. Sure, it was terrific.
Thanks so much. Jenny.
Hi everyone. Yeah, it's a inspiring talk and daunting at the same time. Living in an area where there's like, an hour's journey to go to a couple of towns away, and that's not even that far from Brisbane. It's daunting, and I can see. I love Roger's idea that it's about the fires, and that is the thing that is most immediate to us. And I think that finding where it was that he was getting that information from, and actually, pushing that and trying to get those fire chiefs on side somehow with XR would be just fantastic. But yeah, feeling kind of a bit overwhelmed. There's no way I would have left, Sergio, when you said, so you're either out or you're in. Oh, yeah, I mean, and that's not fair. I'm a gambler, like I'll take a risk, see what's coming up next. Anyway, it's been a very entertaining thing. And Joel, you've had some fantastic input. Thanks a million. Yeah, that's me. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Jenny. And Ross.
Hi, everybody. Ross here. I'm also in Newcastle. Yes, I'm really inspired. I loved the talk. It was very inspiring to hear about London. I can imagine us doing something like that in Sydney. And I'm scared. I'm very scared. And I'm particularly like the whole thing just sort of I'm unprepared. Like I feel like, I would love to do something like that, but I'd like to plan it for a longer time. And I'll do what I can from March 22nd to April, whatever it was, but I know I'm going to have limitations. Anyway, but I'm so inspired, and I love listening to Roger, and I love listening to you, Joel, and I love listening to Liam. So thank you very much for organizing this, Sergio. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Also, I put my number in the chat. Feel free to message me. Ewan.
Yeah, g'day fellas and everyone. Sorry, not just fellas. Sorry, I'm a bit tired. I'm on the bus trying to juggle everything. Hello, people. Cool. Thanks for the talk. It's bloody awesome. Yeah, I reckon it's a great idea. Let's do it. We'll have to view it through the lenses of our, geography, population, and burnout. I kind of, whenever we talk about having lack of capacity and stuff, you don't really get it unless you have a stretch and you throw it out there for people to come and fill the gaps that get left. But that does lead to burnout, does lead to regen problems, and that stuff's really important for this new world that we're trying to build. So I'm totally down, but I don't fully agree with like the full simplicity that you've outlined, because you need to bring people along with a broader narrative, and I just unfortunately don't feel like people get climate emergency here to make that an easy task. However, through our actions, we make it a bit clearer what emergency means, and it means going and freaking shutting down the city. So, yeah, let's do it. I don't think we can do it in March, but I think we can launch it in March. Would be my take on it. But we launch it hard and we bloody do it. Cool.
Great. Thanks so much, Ewan. Yeah, Joel, I think it's just me and you left. Feel free if you'd like to respond to any of the previous speakers or the chat or some of the people with concerns or anything like that as our guest speaker.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fantastic to see so many of you, considering and thinking about this. I think one thing I would say is that from all my experience in XR of two years worth of doing it and the activism I was doing before that, there's a myth that you can build capacity and have this standing army and go, yes, we've reached 20,000 people, go. It just doesn't work like that at all. That implies a kind of linear projection. The way it goes is you have Roger sitting in a road on his own for a few years. Then he had like 20 people doing it with him. And suddenly he had 20,000 people doing it with him. And that's because people like Roger were serious about it and taking the necessary action from the beginning. And that was like that was the grain of sand that the pearl could form around, because it needed something in there that actually was real and that was talking truth in that way. So in some ways, that's got to be the frame of mind that you get in. The certainly has always been the case with looking at the big past protest movement as well. I guess actually, if you look at the Black Lives Matter thing as well, it doesn't just come from, it can come from outside your protest movement as well. But, it does just go, nothing's happening with Black Lives Matter, and then everything's happening with it all at the same time. The thing with the climate crisis is you're not going to have a George Floyd moment necessarily for that to happen spontaneously. And so there's very something distinct about a material existential crisis that's projected to be coming in 20 years' time, but be too late to do about anything in 2 years' time. And that is that we have to create that moment that forms it. And so that's sitting in the road, that's being on top of a plane, but it's through our own actions materializing the seriousness of the situation so that that bigger thing can form around it in that way. And I'll just leave you with an optimistic version of that. At the end of the April Rebellion, when the pink boat was being taken away, there was like, everyone was super attached to it, and the police had formed this massive line that blocked all the streets in like a runway for half a mile, so they'd have a clear place to take it out. And then people were filling those and blocking those streets like in a huge ring to stop the pink boat being taken. And I ran round the outside of all of them to see how many like people in there were prepared to know what to do to be non-violent in it. And each one I said, hands up, if you've been arrested before, hands up if you've been here before. And like, it was like 5% had done any activism before, 10% had been arrested. The rest of them had all just come down in the last like day because this thing was taking off, and had no activist experience at all, but had just turned up because something was happening. The real had finally stepped into this unreal world where everyone's denying it, and they'd seen some people taking it seriously, so they'd dropped everything, they'd flunked off work, and they'd come down here to do it. And that can happen. It literally can happen. It's not pie in the sky. The one thing that is absolutely certain is it won't happen unless there's some people there first, right? That's the one thing I can guarantee. It won't happen unless you're there first. So that's the certainty you can work with.
At the very least, we can be the grain of sand that forms a pearl. That was beautiful, Joel. And thank you so much. You've been incredible. Liam's been incredible. Roger was great as always. Yeah, I don't know. My checkout is I was really nervous coming into this because I knew what the proposition was. And I'm glad that sort of Roger said it before me in a way. Anyway, so it's good. Look, only some of the people in any space is gonna be the person to step up, take that leadership and say, I'm gonna stay for 14 days, even when, we've already made a decision that we'll only be here for 3, right? Like, we know how it goes. So, the future looks terrifying, as Ross says, super exciting, as, we've seen in London and that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm super excited to join you all on this journey. And I have to say, I mean, I totally winged the whole time thing, but we're totally on time. I can't believe it. That was totally a winger. Anyway, I'm going to put my number in the chat again. You know, I'm totally in service to this community. Call me to, you know, if you're having troubles with capacity, or if you're having trouble with, you know, outreach or whatever. I work with lots of amazing people, including Rosa and Jared, who's doing awesome work, Julie, Jenny, lots of people doing awesome work. I'm connected and I can help. Yeah, so, and I will also, you'll have an email with me from me about the Coming to the Truth little action design, answering the hard questions, how's it going webinar on the 8th of March. Okay, that's it. Wow, we did it. That's it. All right, everyone.